NBC News obtained excerpts of remarks by former President Barack Obama to Democrats at a private DNC fundraiser that was held over the weekend. He told the group this: "I think it's going to require a little bit less navel gazing and a little less whining and being in fetal positions. And it's going to require Democrats to just toughen up." Obama went on to say that he was not surprised by what President Trump has done, but that he has been surprised by Democrats who, in his words, stood for all kinds of stuff, who seem like they're kind of cowed and intimidated and shrinking away from just asserting what they believe, or at least what they say that said they believe. The former president continued, "What's being asked of us is make some effort to stand up for the things that you think are right and be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable in defense of your values. If we do our jobs over the next year and a half, then I think we will rebuild momentum and we will position ourselves to get this country moving in the direction it should." Tough words there from the former president. Joining us now to talk about that and much more, former Georgia gubernatorial nominee Stacey Abrams. She also got a new book out titled Coded Justice. It's out today. We will get to that in just a moment. Stacey, good to see you again this morning. Let's start with the remarks here from the former president, which were amplified by his office. This is something that he wanted to get out there. Some tough words telling the party to stop whining, to start fighting. What do you think?
I think we are in a place now where the shock of the election is over. The shock of the chaos has now should be over too. And now we've got to start showing people what's next. This is the time for us to understand the peril that we're in. We're on the 10 steps to autocracy and we're around step 9. But that doesn't mean we've lost. It means we've got to fight. And I think what the president is saying is that it is our time to reassert our values, but to also show that democracy can deliver. People do not want the specter of democracy. They want the reality, because in lieu of being able to see what democracy can give you, autocracy seems fine. If you want the streets to be clean, if you want immigrants to be gone, what he's doing makes sense until you realize you are sacrificing freedom, you are sacrificing assembly, you are sacrificing your future for a momentary convenience. And Democrats have to connect the dots, and we've got to show over and over again, even if we don't have power, we do have presence and we can do the work.
So one of the things that you've done really successfully is you've broken through. You are a person who has been able to engage in the larger discourse in a way that not many Democrats have. So my question for you is, how did you do that? And what are your, I'm sorry, it's a hard question. No, it's unanswerable. But how did you do that? And what's your advice to other members of the party who cannot get traction, who may have high positions of power, so to speak, and cannot break through?
We tend to start with our own level of understanding, with our own level of experience. We spend a lot of time lecturing rather than listening. I try my best to understand where people start. And one of the ways you tell stories is to figure out, where do you enter? And part of it for me is, in this moment, we keep using the $30 words: autocracy, oligarchy, authoritarianism. What does that look like in practice? When you can be kidnapped off of the streets of the United States, that's what we're talking about. When your kid may not get lunch when they go back to school in the fall, that's what we're talking about. The ability to dismantle the Department of Education on a whim and to have a Supreme Court say, okay, sorry, that's an example. But we've got to connect the dots. We can't presume outrage if we haven't explained intention. And I think part of what we can do in this moment is not just connect the dots, but then empower people. Say, look, now that this is happening, if they're going to get rid of school lunches, let's start packing lunches for other kids. Let's start doing things in practical ways that let people understand what their power looks like.
Joe, jump in.
I wanted to ask you about understanding what's going on. You said, I have to kind of get out of your own world, sort of understand what else is going on out there. I remember after the election, AOC had said that she talked to people who voted for both her and Donald Trump, and she was genuinely curious. How could you do that? How do you vote for him and what he says? How do you vote for me and what I say? And of course, a lot of Americans just aren't that ideological. I'm curious what your theory is on how are there people who voted for both you when you ran and Donald Trump? How are there Hispanics that broke more for Donald Trump this year and black voters that broke more for Donald Trump this year than in years past, despite all the things that he said on the campaign trail? How is it that his approval rating still sits somewhere between 41, 42, 43, 45%? What insights do you think Democrats need to have about his appeal even after all these years?
I'm actually less concerned about his appeal because this is his last term. I'm more concerned about a party apparatus that has decided that it's willing to cede power than it is to serve people. And I'm also less focused on those whose votes switch back and forth than I am about the people who never voted. The 90 million people who said a pox on both your houses because you can't see me, you're not listening to me, you're not serving me. I think the future of the Democratic Party is, yes, to bring in those who may disagree with us ideologically, but it's more important that we go after those who do not believe that this government, no matter who's in charge, actually sees them and serves them. People need to see democracy actually delivering for them. They need to see justice and dignity and fairness and opportunity in their real lives. And to the extent we're fighting over who showed up for whom the last time and we're not focusing on who didn't think they could be invited to the party, that's the problem that we have. So we need to be focusing on how do we bring more people in to the body politic.
I think that is such a great point. And I think it's such a great point because I saw it with Ronald Reagan, where Democrats were still fighting Ronald Reagan when he had been out of office for 3 years. And Republicans were still fighting Barack Obama when he had already left Washington. You are right. Donald Trump is president now, but he's not on the ballot again. Like, that's the last political war that was fought.
Exactly.
It's the next political war. Can you just talk a little more about that? Because, again, you're so right. They shouldn't be obsessing so much on Donald Trump, but the party that passes this legislation and the party that allows all of these cuts to happen.
Exactly. I mean, look, if you think about the 10 steps to autocracy, step 2 is the overreaching expansion of executive power. He can only use it for so long, but once it's expanded, it's hard to take power back. Step 3 is whether or not you have a Congress that's complicit and a judiciary that's neutered. Well, when the Supreme Court says that the president cannot be held accountable, that changes the nature of our country. And when Congress says that we are more concerned about being reelected than we are about serving our communities, that we are okay with your grandma being kicked out of her nursing home so that we can keep our jobs and kneel at the feet of the wealthy, that's the problem. And so our responsibility is to talk about what's coming next, not what got us here. We need to understand what got us here, but we've got to be talking to people about what they can do to put us on a future path that gets us to where we should be, not where they want to steer us.
So, Stacey, let's now turn to your book and in the latest installment of your Avery Keene series, this one titled Coded Justice. Your heroine is taking on a new challenge, leaving her position as a Supreme Court clerk and accepting a case involving artificial intelligence in the medical industry. Stacey, it is ripped from the headlines or the headlines of a newspaper in the very, very near future. So talk to us about this book and how AI, which is going to impact all of our lives soon enough, shapes the story.
So AI is the center of the story because we have retired Major Rafe Diaz, who has a company. He's trying to serve his fellow veterans, some of the most diverse populations we have in this country. He wants to use AI to deliver their health care, but his ambition runs into some bad actions. And we have to understand that AI is a technology. It's a tool. The question is, who's in charge of the tool? How is that tool trained? I mean, we recently saw this week what happens when AI is trained on the wrong information, the bad actions and the bad words that come out. Well, this book explores what happens when Avery, my intrepid heroine, has to help figure out why people are dying, both the patients and potentially those who know too much.
All right. Well, that's a good tease there. The new book, Coded Justice, out now. New York Times bestselling author Stacey Abrams. Stacey, thank you again. Congratulations. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.